Chapter 5, Mr. Kermit. Emma Fountain. I can scarcely believe it. Of all the classrooms in all the schools, she has to walk into mine. She's a time machine. That's what she is. The spitting image of her mother. It brings back memories I thought were buried forever. I can still see the engagement notice in the newspaper. Fiona Bertelsmann and Zachary Kermit. The photo of the happy couple cheek to cheek. Eyebrows perfectly aligned, smiling like nothing was ever going to come and rain on our parade. How innocent we were then, how blind, how foolish. It was all over in a heartbeat. The test, the scandal, the breakup. Since then, I've only seen smiles like that twice. 7 months later, when Fiona lined her eyebrows up with Gil Fountain in the engagement notices, and today, when their daughter Emma stepped through the doorway of room 117. Fate has a way of sticking it to you twice, resurfacing, like a bad burrito. This morning was my second shot. Every day draws me 24 hours closer to early retirement, but the last lap isn't going to be a cakewalk. First, Thaddeus and the Unteachables, and now Fiona's clone in the room next door, a living, breathing, bucket-filling reminder of the life I missed out on. If that poor kid tries to teach middle schoolers the way she ran her kindergarten classes, her students will have her throat open by Columbus Day. I should sit her down and explain a few things, but that would mean I care. Caring is where the trouble starts. Hard experience taught me that. I didn't make it to the cusp of early retirement by caring. I made it by keeping my head down, regardless of whether they gave me honor, students, or Unteachables, or the zombie apocalypse. All I have to do is endure. There are small satisfactions, the hiss of the air-controlled closing of the school entrance behind me as I exit the building, the crunch of my shoes on the bad pavement of the parking lot, the stab of pain in my sore shoulder as I open the ill-fitting door of my 1992 Chrysler Concorde, the one Fiona and I bought to start our life together. Sky blue, although now it's mostly rust. I don't know why I've kept it so long. For sure, it isn't the money. The repair bills alone would have bought me a Lamborghini. I turn the key on the ignition and the motor coughs and dies. A few minutes later, the hood is open, and I'm starting in at who knows what. Suddenly, there's a screech of tires, and a pickup truck is reversing across the parking lot at top speed, hurtling toward me. My one thought is that if I'm crushed to death here and now, Dr. Thaddeus in the school district won't ever have to pay for my early retirement. The pickup roars to a stop with its rear bumper 6 inches from my legs. Eyes blazing, I shout, "Are you crazy?" The door opens and the driver gets out. I blink. It's one of my students. I know the Unteachables are a rough crowd, but I never expected one of them to steal a truck and use it to try to kill me. "Sorry, the gas pedal gets stuck sometimes a little." When my shocked expression doesn't fade, the kid added, "It's me, Parker, from class. What can I do to help?" "To start with," I rasped, "you can stop reversing at 90 miles an hour. Why is a middle schooler driving at all?" As he launches into a whole story about his grandmother, the family farm, and a provisional license, I conjure up a picture of him in a front row desk, examining worksheets from point-blank range like he's staring through a jeweler's eyepiece. "Wow, that's a pretty old car," he tells me. "I mean, mine's old, but yours is like classic." He squints at the name in raised chrome letters. "It's a Coco Nerd?" "Concord," I correct impatiently. Didn't anyone ever teach this boy to read?" "Never mind that. Any idea how I can get it started up again?" "Give Parker credit. He's better with cars than he is with words. He tinkers around under the hood, and pretty soon the motor's running again, although it's belching gray smoke all over the parking lot." "Stop it!" A silver Prius pulls up alongside. The windows open, and through the billowing clouds, we can just make out Miss Emma Fountain. "Turn it off! Turn it off!" Parker rushes behind the wheel and kills the engine. She gets out of the Prius, waving her arms to clear the air. Do you have any idea how much carbon is in that smoke? Mrs. Vardalos is the chemistry teacher, I reply, deliberately misunderstanding the point she's trying to make. I'm in charge of, well, you know which class I'm in charge of. I indicate Parker with a slight nod. I'm bucket filling, Parker tells her proudly. You know, helping Kermit. Mr. Kermit, she asked, how old is that car? Your mother and I picked it out, I inform her, with an oddly defiant smile. Her eyes widen. Oh, wow, that's old. It's just that people didn't understand emissions back then. It was before everyone started putting the environment first, recycling, composting, installing solar panels. A long speech forms in my mind about how this is a free country and it's none of her business what anybody drives or how old it is or what it spews into the atmosphere. But for some reason, I can't say it. Not to her, not to that face that looks so much like Fiona's. She softens. Well, maybe you can keep it, but you definitely have to put in a catalytic converter. It's on my list, I assure her, right after a new floor for the back seat, just in case I ever have passengers. Parker peers into the back. Whoa, is that the ground? Air conditioning, I supply, tight-lipped. Old school. Emma regards me with pity. On the plus side, she and Parker managed to get the motor running again, minus the smoke this time. Wow, Miss Fountain, Parker raves. You're really good with cars. I learned from my mom, she explains. She took a course in auto mechanics because she bought a real lemon once and... Her voice trails off as she frowns at the old Concorde connecting the dots. I swallow what's left of my pride. Thanks for your help. I'm positive that her first act after getting home will be to call her mother and say, Ma, guess what? He still has that old car. The calendar appears in my mind, the magical date, in June circled in gold Sharpie. Only 172 more days to go. Chapter 6, Matteo Hendrickson. When I get really bored, which is every day, I match people I know with characters from TV shows and movies. For example, my sister Lauren is like Venom from Spider-Man because she's evil and spits poison. Well, not literally, but since I invented the classification system, I get to choose who's what. Just don't tell my mom because she's like Professor McGonagall from Harry Potter. Smart and usually fair, but she can be nasty when something ticks her off, like me comparing Lauren to a Spider-Man villain. It works for the kids at school, too. Parker's like Lightning McQueen because he's the only kid who drives. Barnstorm is the Flash because he was such a great athlete before he wound up on crutches. Raheem is a little tricky, but I think him as Birdman because he has really big ears and could easily expand to wings if he gets bitten by a radioactive canary. Crazy, I know, but in comics, that kind of thing happens all the time. Anyway, I can always switch him to Sleeping Beauty. He's not that beautiful, but he is always sleeping. Elaine is a cross between Chewbacca from Star Wars and Lois Lane, who also rhymes with pain. I try not to get too close to her. She once picked a kid up by the belt and used his head to poke at a fluorescent light that was buzzing. Kiana is Blonde Phantom, since they're both from California, even though Kiana's hair is closer to light brown. And Aldo, that's easy. Dr. Bruce Banner, who turns into the Incredible Hulk when he gets mad. As for me, I'm part Hobbit and part Vulcan, Bilbo and Spock. Big logic in a small package. That leaves just our teacher, Mr. Kermit. He's tough to characterize. I'm leaning toward Squidward because he comes to class in the morning and he reminds me of Squidward coming to work at the Krusty Krab, bored and bummed out. And he treats us the way Squidward treats customers. He doesn't hate us exactly, but he definitely wishes we were somewhere else. He's even a little grumpier than Squidward because he doesn't have a hobby like playing the clarinet, unless you count crossword puzzles and consuming mass quantities of coffee. For someone who's supposed to be a teacher, he sure doesn't do much teaching. Mostly he just hands out worksheets. The only time he talks is when somebody asks a question. That usually ends up being me. Mr. Kermit, why do the magnetic poles reverse? With effort, the teacher tears his attention away from his puzzle. Excuse me? Every 250,000 years, Earth's magnetic poles reverse, I explain. I was just wondering why that happens. Yes, but what does that have to do with? Reluctantly, he glances from the New York Times to the worksheet on his desk beside it, using vocabulary words in a sentence. I want to do a sentence on Magneto, I reason, but since his superpower is magnetism and electric charge, he'd be affected by that. That's another thing about Mr. Kermit. He isn't very helpful when one of his students is curious about something. The only other time there are questions is when Parker's trying to figure out what a word is. That turns into a kind of game in SCS-8, figuring out what he means by tramgully when the word is really metallurgy. Sometimes the whole class gets into guessing. It's the only fun we have during school. It can get pretty loud when people start laughing at Parker. Mr. Kermit is usually okay with it unless Miss Fountain comes over to explain that we're disturbing her class. Then he chews us out. He doesn't get mad at us, but he can't stand it when she does. This one time, Barnstorm makes a big stink, pounding his desk with both crutches because the football team is holding its first pep rally and he isn't going to be there with the players. It's not fair, man, he roars. Just because I'm injured doesn't mean I'm not a golden eagle. Mr. Kermit's curiosity is suddenly piqued. If you were in the pep rally, you'd have to leave now, right? You'd be somewhere else for the rest of the day. Barnstorm nods. The team gets the whole afternoon off to prepare for it. I'm stuck here working. That might be pushing it a little. I've seldom seen Barnstorm pick up a pencil. That sounds reasonable to me, Mr. Kermit agrees. It isn't your fault that you got injured. Why should you have to suffer for it? I get the feeling that Mr. Kermit doesn't care much about justice for Barnstorm. What he really wants to get this disturber of the peace out of room 117 before he puts one of the crutches through a wall. Miss Fountain would definitely notice that. So he goes on the intercom and demands to have Barnstorm included in the rally. He argues his way through 3 secretaries, the assistant principal, and he won't take no for an answer. We're blown away. It's a whole new side of our teacher none of us have seen before. He's actually fighting for one of us when we would have bet money that he barely even noticed we were here. Put me through to Coach Slattery, Mr. Kermit insists. He's in class right now, comes the reply from the speaker. Well, get him out of class, our teacher retorts. Justice and fairness aren't just part of social studies curriculum, you know. They're the building blocks of our entire society. No one is more amazed than Barnstorm himself. That's what I'm talking about, he approves in a satisfied tone. By the time Mr. Kermit gets off with the athletic office, he's really worked up. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, he accuses Coach Slattery. You send these kids out there to be tackled and elbowed and hit with hockey sticks, and when they get injured, you abandon them? When the coach finally breaks down and says, okay, whatever, just send them down, our whole class breaks into applause. You are awesome, Mr. Kermit, Kianek exclaims. You should be in the Justice League, I add. He looks startled as if he didn't realize anybody was listening. He turns to Barnstorm. Well, off you go. Enjoy your... His voice trails off. Pep rally, I supply helpfully. Barnstorm is already swinging toward the door. Thanks, Mr. Kermit. Throughout the afternoon, our teacher keeps looking at Barnstorm's empty desk and smiling. Another first for him. And at the end of the day, when we're called down to the pep rally, he smiles all the way to the auditorium, even though our class is always terrible marching through the hallways. Aldo karate kicks lockers. Raheem stakes out water fountains so that he can spray people. This 7th grader gives Elaine a hard time about blocking the stairs, but only till he realizes who he's talking to. Better be blocked on the stairs than to take a one-way trip down them or to have a classroom door slammed in your head, or any of other things that Elaine does to people who annoy her. The kid apologizes and gets out of there so fast that he slams into Parker, and they both end up blocking the stairs for real. Not even the spoils of Mr. Kermit's mood. Not even that spoils Mr. Kermit's mood. It's a problem. He's much too happy to be Squidward now, until we reach the auditorium. We're standing there waiting for our turn to file in when an ear-splitting honk goes off right behind us. Mr. Kermit practically hits the ceiling. He wheels around to see this kid with a bright green vuvuzela, one of those noisemakers that look like a long plastic trumpet. They're kind of a tradition for the Golden Eagle sports because one of our school board members is from South Africa where they were invented. Without a word, Mr. Kermit snatches the thing out of the kid's hand and throws it to the floor and stomps it flat. The boy looks at him, lip quivering. "But it's a pep rally." "Who says pep can't be quiet?" The teacher's furious eyes fix on a girl who is holding a purple one. "Don't even think about it." Nervously, she whisks the instrument behind her back. Mr. Kermit nods. That's the spirit. Problem solved. He's Squidward again. When it comes to vuvuzelas, he might even be Lex Luthor. At the pep rally, they make us sit in the back just in case we have to be kicked out. Our class always sits in the back, even in the cafeteria. The teachers don't want us anywhere near the soda machine. They think that giving us sugar is like sparkling water on the Gremlins. I cheer when Barnstorm is introduced. I've never known anybody on a team before. He waves a crutch in our direction and a few other kids clap too. Then Raheem falls asleep. His head slumps over and he conks the girl sitting next to him. We all get kicked out.